Silke, I wanted to thank you for inviting me here today to have this conversation with you. I thought we'd start very simply by with me asking why do you work in the medium of video?
Yeah, when I first started with like my artistic practice during my first studies here in Dortmund, it was mostly painting and photography for me. And I already noticed that I wanted to narrate something like that could also expand in time, and the ideas that I had for my works became more and more complex. And at some point I realized, or like also the step from photography to video, I guess it makes sense, like because also the technology at the time, it just developed quite fast, and it's like, okay, now you can like use those DSLR cameras to make like really nice video footage. And so at some point I started experimenting with that. Yeah, and I guess this aspect of time is something that I really needed for my work. Yeah.
And I'd say, correct me if I'm wrong, but the subjects or the types of moving image works or films that you make are documentarian in their style. And I was curious about how you find the subjects that you work with, because it seems to vary from groups of people, groups of men, to individual women, to family members. And perhaps you could talk a little bit about that.
I think, yeah, throughout the last years it's been very different also for each project. Sometimes it was an online research that led me to a group of people. For example, with the monk procession in Saxony, it was like that because I was researching about an alt-right organization called 1%, and they had their, how you say, like mailbox in that small town. So they were registered. The organization was registered in that small town where the monk procession happened. And so this is how I learned about the monks. And of course that the fact that I was researching this alt-right organization and that this research led me to the monks, filled me with some prejudice against their tradition, which I had to confront also throughout that process of filming, because like looking at it, like the aesthetic of some elderly men doing a procession dressed up as monks with torches in their head, of course I had those associations to like conservative, like maybe even alt-right sentiments. But when I went there and interviewed the members, two members especially of this group, I learned that for the people in the small town, it has a very subversive character, that tradition, because they already did it during the National Socialist time and during the GDR times, when everything to do with religion was frowned upon. So to them, this tradition, which looks very conservative or backwards in a way, has a very progressive character. And that's also something that I wanted to transport in that movie, like this togetherness or like solidarity.
Was? Verklungen. Verklungen. Das ist 12, ne? Verklungen. Da machen wir bitte alle 3 Strophen noch. Die Nacht ist von den Bergen gestiegen, die Lichter im talischen Haus. Die ersten Silben höre ich gar nicht. Können wir bitte von Anfang an ganz deutlich sprechen? Sonst hören die Leute unten auch nicht. Nochmal.
It was very interesting to me that the tradition is very obviously invented, because they say they are reenacting the lives of the monks that used to live up on that hill in the monastery. But those monks who lived there, they were only there until the 16th century, and the songs they are singing together in the choir while they're doing the procession, they are from the 19th, like late 19th and early 20th century. So, and also the costumes, they are not like iconographically correct.
But this is part of a series invented traditions, and this is number 2.
Yeah.
But invented traditions number 1 is following a group of boys or a group of young men who also have their own example of a kind of invented tradition. And within that film, when we spoke about this film before, it's something that it's these kind of traditions that you grew up around and your mother grew up around.
Yeah, the whole tradition that is shown in Weihnacht. Yeah, this is like, from the beginning it was much more personal to me because I already knew this tradition growing up from my mother's stories about her like teenage years, that she would be one of the women who were getting auctioned by the bachelors in this small town. And yeah, growing up I thought this has to be a thing of the past. Like I would have never thought that this is still happening. And then when I got older in high school, I learned, okay, some of the young men from the small towns around my city, they're still doing that, and this tradition is alive still.
There's also this beautiful moment in the film where they're in the churchyard, I think, and you see the men kind of there, but then everyone files out at the end, and you see the kind of the clergy, the churchmen, and then the army, the kind of old soldiers, and you think, okay, these are also invented traditions at some point, or also ways in which like men are together, or kind of enact these rituals together. And so, whilst this is a recent one, it's kind of from a lineage of tradition or something.
And all of those traditions were founded at like almost the same time period, like when nationalism had to be promoted. With the bridal auction, I know that they invented this tradition in the 19th century in order to make sure that the young women would marry within the same village, so that the land would not go, the land that they would inherit would not go to the neighboring village, so that a village could keep its prosperity.
But in this film, and I guess this kind of brings us on to the question that always plagues me, and I think also plagues you, around what happens when you film someone, and however much kind of consent there is and agency from the other person, there's always this conversation around ethics. This conversation that always comes up around, what you show, what you don't show, like how much protection you give to these young people. So yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a broad question, but speaking about ethics within...
I think it's always a thin line, and I mean, it's really complicated to ask those questions. Like, and I guess I also, in a way, still struggle with it. I mean, the most important thing, I guess, is to communicate openly with the subjects, like what my aim is, and also to show them a rough cut so they know what it's all about. And I think at that point, when they've seen a rough cut, like on a big screen, that's mostly when they realize, okay, this is not only for us, this is going to be public. And that's also when I really want their consent, even though, of course, I know that there might still be moments where they feel confronted by their own behavior. But on the other hand, I don't think it would be fair of me to take away their agency, like by saying, okay, no, I have to protect them from anything that can happen afterwards.
But I think that leads me on to talk about the film that you made with Alina, the young female boxer in Dortmund.
Wie viele Runden? Wie viel oft?
2 Kämpfe.
Wie viele Minuten?
Na, du kämpfst nicht.
Wie?
Wallah, du kämpfst nicht.
Warte mal, was jetzt?
Du kämpfst nicht.
Wie? Warte.
Hier, da, pass. Wallah, du kämpfst nicht.
du kämpfst nicht.
Ist euer Ernst?
Wallah, die meinten irgendwie, du hast keinen Gegner oder so.
Ey, nicht euer Ernst? Ich hab 10er bezahlt, diese Missgeburten.
Wallah,
Kriegst
sag
von
das.
mir wieder.
Nein, eiskalt, was ist da? Ey, Albert hat mich gar nicht eingetragen.
Doch, du stehst da drin.
Nein, Albert hat mich gar nicht... Ich habe mich doch selber eingetragen.
Keine Ahnung, was?
Ey, was ist das deren Ernst, Alter?
Ja, ich muss mit Albert reden. Die meinten, Alena hat keinen Tag. Scheiß Gericht.
Was, ey, das fuckt mich gerade herbe ab.
Und sonst so viel Essen mitgenommen, dies, das,
Ey, du meinst, warte. Ja, okay, jetzt warst du Spaß bestimmt, ne?
Nein, Wallah nein.
Mist, ich habe umsonst für die Haare bitte umsonst Eintritt, ey. Wallah.
And what I'm always struck by when you speak about that film is that you speak about your relationship with her first, and how she came to your screenings when you had the show in Düsseldorf, and how you see her often in the street and you stop and speak and you continue a relationship with her. And she continues to regard that film as being important to her. And maybe you could speak about that film a little bit and how you formed that relationship and, yeah, the legacy of that.
Yeah, I met Alena in 2018 when Nicola Gerdes, Tommy Shea and I did a martial arts studio in our project space, Salon Atelier. Mm-hmm. And she was one of the coaches. So she and her friend Jana, they would come and teach the kids kickboxing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was really, really nice. And already then, like, she and her friend, they would like want to have like the photos and the footage from our project for their social media accounts. And I noticed that she like feels very comfortable in front of the camera, and she really likes her picture taken, and she likes to be videographed too. So yeah, when she like continued to practice for the European Championship, I asked her if she would be interested in like me following her with the camera, and yeah, she was really eager to have someone document it. And so we started the filming. During the European Championships she was injured, so right after that, like it basically meant the end of her career for a while. So she just finished her school and she had to start her apprenticeship. It was not clear if and when she would like go back to this competitive sport, especially now that she had like, as an apprentice, she just had more responsibilities and her life got like more serious, like she was just growing up. And at some point she asked me to re-watch the footage of her injury, and then like she already decided that yeah, it's totally okay for her if the film is being made. And that was very important to me because I knew I have this footage, but without her consent, obviously it's worth nothing, because it's just about one person, and of course I want that person to be able to live with that film and like maybe even be happy about it. And yeah, my expectations with that one were like exceeded in that sense that she was very happy about the result, because for her it's like a document of that time where she really like pushed through and she lived her dream to becoming a professional Thai boxer.
And in this film, unlike your other films, I think, and maybe correct me on this, but you filmed it yourself or entirely yourself. What was the difference in making this film and filming yourself as opposed to working with people?
But yeah, of course, with Alena it was very different because it was only me and her. Like, I mean, also as a woman, I could go into the dressing room with her, and like when she would like do her bandages, I could film her and her friend, and also her friends felt quite comfortable with me because it was not like that big film team. It was just like one person following her, and it was like, yeah, I was welcomed everywhere, and that was really like nice to have that intimate setting. But of course, sometimes it's also a big advantage to have a professional setting, because then also people are very aware of the publicity, or how you say, like, of how public this process is, and also the result will be.
And talking about bigger productions, and I suppose also moving away from working with real people, or kind of people as themselves, I should say.
Yeah.
Your next kind of film after that was Family Business, which also brings in some other kind of themes. I see this kind of, and these kind of films that we've been talking about today is touching on many things, but for me they touch heavily on gender, or kind of how people kind of navigate the world and find each other in communities. But this film, Family Business, you were invited to make in a McDonald's, and it talks about family and relationships, but it also talks about the relationship of the art to this area, and maybe like what it means to be making art as and its relationship to gentrification also. In the Ruhr.
Vielleicht auch so, man kann organisieren, wie so eine Tombola zu spielen.
Ja, kann man natürlich machen. Natürlich kann man das machen.
Aber ja, aber
willst du
was
da
ist
jetzt
das Problem?
reinholen?
Bringt kein Geld oder was?
Eine Tombola ist keine Idee, irgendwas zu sanieren oder irgendwie neu zu kriegen. Du musst ganz anders anfangen.
Wie?
Nee. Indem du hier wirklich Geld reinsteckst, und das Geld hast du nicht, nämlich Geld, womit man die Decke hier sanieren kann, womit man den
kann
ganzen
auch mit
Kern sanieren
wenig
kann.
Geld, weil
Du
Leute
darfst
brauchen
hier
ein Ort, wo sie zusammen sein können.
Ja, voll, ja, das stimmt.
Und
aber
Leute brauchen das.
Das stimmt, aber du kannst es 5 bis 10 Jahre betreiben und dann musst du alles ändern, weil irgendwie die Bestimmungen sich ändern, weil es nicht mehr auf dem Stand ist, weil die Lüftung nicht mehr funktioniert. Danke. Weil es irgendwie, das ist so...
Das alles stimmt nicht.
I mean, from the very beginning, it was super interesting to hear that this was the first McDonald's in the whole Ruhrgebiet, in the small town of Herne. I mean, you would imagine it would have been Essen or Bochum or Dortmund, like one of the big cities, but it was Herne in 1975. I think the next McDonald's was in Düsseldorf back then. So, yeah, that was quite amazing. And of course, it also made me think about like the Americanization of West Germany, and how, like, what McDonald's and other like big companies played in that narrative.
Da steckt unser Geld drin hier.
Genau.
In all diesen Dingen.
Ja, das stimmt.
Ja.
Schade, schade. Also die Zeiten waren wirklich schön hier. Das waren also super, super Zeiten. Ne?
Wie viele Jahre hast du hier gewirkt?
30.
30. Das heißt, du warst
Ich
fast
war doch so
von
jung.
der ersten Stunde.
Ihr seid doch nicht so wie Hausbesitzer, sondern eben wie Familienmitglied, wie Freunde.
Die Kampagne
So
spricht
war's.
ja auch von einer großen Familie, glaube ich. Ne?
Ja. Ja. Ich weiß nicht.
But then also just the fact that this storefront had been empty for 10 years and nothing has changed. Like the kitchen was still there, ready to use. Like the furniture was still intact. Like everything, it was a time capsule. So that was kind of a surreal film set. And then in that case also like an exhibition space. Yeah, so I made like 3 videos about the, one about the past, one about the present, and one about the possible future of this McDonald's branch.
And you worked with actors to make one of those films.
Yes, I worked with actors to make a film with a title like Children's Birthday Party. Yeah, because I mean, I guess that's also like one of my big childhood memories, like going to McDonald's and then like even getting like a how you say, like behind the scenes look into the kitchen and stuff, like the whole tour and like the presents and yeah, so I guess like there's also a lot of nostalgia for me, and of course like nostalgia is always a big danger in art, but then at the same time I thought like what the fuck, like especially with McDonald's I have to embrace it in that sense. And yeah, the actors, they also had like their autobiographical memories of McDonald's. They all had a connection to it, like a personal connection. They took on roles of people I met also during the interview phase for the more documentary-like video. They took on like the different perspectives of what to do with that space.
Und ich weiß nicht, was innovativ sein soll darin, hier irgendwelche Jazzclubs aufzumachen, die aber die Stadt überhaupt nicht angehen und überhaupt nicht interessieren. Du willst Leute von außerhalb irgendwie holen, ohne Arbeitsplätze zu schaffen, ohne nichts. Leute, die nicht herziehen, sondern von außen, die kommen, die kein Geld hierher dingsen oder vielleicht ein bisschen, aber nicht nachhaltig.
Aber ich finde diese
das
Stadt interessant. Arrogant. Ich finde das nicht...
Dann
aber dann macht doch genau was für die Stadt. Das ist das, ihr sprecht vom Gleichen. Und dann kann man ja schon einen nächsten Schritt machen und schauen, okay, was wäre irgendwie trotzdem noch was wäre neu, so ein ganz neues Modell. Dass man das versucht auch zu mischen. Also schon aber eben erstmal anfängt, was will die Stadt, was braucht die Stadt? Und dann, ich meine, was gibt es hier überhaupt noch an Einrichtungen für junge Menschen? Gibt es überhaupt noch was?
Da gibt es überhaupt noch junge Menschen.
Es wird was geschaffen, damit das zukünftig passieren kann. Das ist schon darauf ausgelegt, dass Leute nachhaltig herziehen und bleiben. Weil ich total beide bin, Innovation ja mega gut ist. Es ist nur einfach voll fahrlässig zu sagen, ich mache was ohne einen Plan von irgendwas zu haben.
Aber das ist nicht ohne Plan.
Ja gut, dann stell uns den Plan vor. Was ist der Plan?
We've talked a lot about the videos and the films that you make. We haven't talked about the installation of your films and the kind of more sculptural and kind of the sculptural aspect of your work. Maybe as we're approaching the end, you could speak about that, because it's a very important part of your process.
Yeah, and especially like with the films like Weihnacht or Mönchszüge, where I filmed a group of people, it was very important for me to create a surrounding where a group of people comes together as an audience and is also in contact with each other. Like in the cinema space, we kind of like, we forget about our bodies and we become mind, and like it's all about like immersing into that experience of watching a film. And I guess the installations, they are immersive in another sense, that they are like mirroring the real life, which is simultaneously happening in the exhibition space. So I really like to create spaces where people then also get to have this dialogue with each other and are confronted with hopefully their own like prejudice. Yeah, and they feel, or they also get the need to start a dialogue maybe with the people they are together with in that space.
So the project that I really got to know you through, and I really saw the process of you putting this film together, was the project about your mother and the cherry tree. And for me, it felt like from your other works, there was a slightly different approach, because you weren't just interrogating someone else's story, you were also looking to yourself and the story that affected you. I was wondering if you could talk about that film.
So when my mother cut down the cherry tree in October 2021, I already knew that I had to film it. Like, so I went there with my camera and I filmed the cutting down of the tree, because I had like this very strong emotional response to it. So this like, I guess, I don't know, you could call it an intuition that is like something that has to be documented. But that's not that different from other projects at this point. I mean, of course, it's already more personal, because it's the cherry tree that's been in my grandparents' garden forever, and now it's in my mother's garden. But like also when Elena had like fights, like it's the same urge to go out with a camera and get that magic shot. Or with the boys celebrating on the 1st of May, it's also like, okay, there's this event and I need to document it. But with my mother, of course it was different in that sense that I had all these assumptions of why she would cut down the cherry tree. It's because my mother is suffering from complex PTSD, and one of the reasons for that is that she's been sexually abused by my grandfather when she was a child. So when she cut down the cherry tree that he had planted, of course I started projecting and making assumptions. And through talking to her about that, I realized that the cutting down is a really nice entry point for us to start this dialogue about this big family trauma that also had an impact on me.
Ich war vor 2 Wochen wieder mit meinen Freunden unterwegs. Wir waren zu dritt und wir alle 3 hatten Missbrauch erlebt. Einmal war es der Onkel, einmal war es auf dem Dorffest ein Mann, der eine Tochter im selben Alter hatte, im gleichen Alter. Und ja, bei mir war es ja der Vater. Also immer im Umfeld, kann man sagen.
Yeah, because I grew up with my grandfather as a important figure in my life, and I always knew that there was something off. And I guess this is also something that informs my other works in a way. It's like this sense that even though something can feel very familiar or very close to you, there can still be like a danger in it, something like that. Things can shift, and that can be a group dynamic that turns into violence when it was like solidarity before and a feeling of safety. But yeah, I mean, that can also be the injury that Alena had to suffer. But it can also be something much more abstract, or abstract as long as it's not abstract anymore, like sexism or other structural problems, I guess. Already, like when we met at Rijks, I knew that I just really wanted to have a prolonged conversation with you, to continue that conversation that we started at Rijks. Yeah.
And I think it will continue for many years to come.
It will.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.